I was sitting in my car when my grandmother's phone call destroyed everything I thought I knew about my family. "Willow, honey, how are you feeling?" she asked, her voice thick with worry. "I'm fine, Grandma." "What's wrong?" "Well, I just wanted to check on your health. Your parents told me you've been seriously ill, and that's why you couldn't make it to the wedding." My stomach twisted into a painful knot. "What wedding, Grandma?" The silence that followed felt endless, just the sound of her breathing and my heartbeat pounding in my ears. "What do you mean, what wedding?" "Diana's wedding. It was last weekend." My hands began to shake. My own sister had gotten married. My parents had lied about why I wasn't there. And I, the older sister, had been completely erased from one of the most important days of our family's life. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white, trying to steady myself as the truth crashed over me like a wave. This wasn't just about missing a wedding. This was about finally seeing what I'd refused to acknowledge my entire life, that to my family, I might as well have been invisible. My name is Willow Fletcher. I'm 33, and for most of my life, I've been the forgotten daughter in a family that revolved around my younger sister Diana. You know those families where one child seems to suck up all the oxygen in the room? That was Diana. Not because she was particularly talented or accomplished, but because she had this way of making everything about her, and my parents just let her. Every Sunday for years, we had the same family dinner routine at my parents' house. Mom's pot roast filling the kitchen with its rich aroma, Dad complaining about his golf game, and Diana glued to her phone when she wasn't monopolizing the conversation. Most Sundays I'd rather have been home alone, but family obligation is a powerful thing. It keeps you showing up even when you're slowly disappearing. This particular Sunday started like any other. The smell of overcooked vegetables hung in the air. Dad was already 3 complaints deep into his golf stories, and Diana was pretending to listen while scrolling through Instagram. But then something shifted. Diana suddenly put her phone down, which was like seeing a unicorn, and got this massive grin on her face. She was practically vibrating in her seat. "Guys, I have something to tell you," she announced, building up the suspense like she was revealing the winner of an Oscar. She held up her left hand, and there it was, a diamond ring catching the kitchen light. "Oh my God, Diana!" Mom's shriek could have shattered glass. She launched herself out of her chair so fast she nearly knocked over her wine glass. "When did this happen?" "Last night," Diana beamed. "We went to that new restaurant downtown, and he proposed right there at the table. It was so romantic." I was genuinely happy for her in that moment. Diana had been with Warren for about 2 years, and while he wasn't exactly the most exciting person, he treated her well. "Congratulations," I said, reaching over to squeeze her hand. "I'm really happy for you. I hope you'll let me be your bridesmaid." That's when Diana's face did something strange. It froze for just a second, and she looked uncomfortable, like I'd asked her something inappropriate. She glanced at Mom and Dad, then back at me. "Oh, well, I haven't really thought about all that stuff yet. I mean, we literally just got engaged last night. There's so much other stuff to figure out first, budget, venue, all that important stuff." I should have known something was off right then, but I gave her the benefit of the doubt. Fresh engagement, lots to process, I got it. After that dinner, I decided to just wait. I figured someone would bring up wedding planning soon enough. Maybe they'd ask me to help with organizing stuff, or at least include me in some of the decisions. I kept expecting phone calls about dress shopping, venue visits, cake tastings, all that sister stuff you see in movies. But weeks turned into months, and nothing. No calls, no texts, no casual mentions of wedding plans during our Sunday dinners. If the wedding came up at all, it was just Diana throwing out vague comments like, "Oh, we're still looking at venues," or "We haven't set a date yet." I started to feel like I was going crazy. Was I supposed to push harder? Was I being too passive? But every time I tried to bring it up, the conversation would somehow pivot to something else, usually whatever drama Diana had going on at work. Then came that phone call from Grandma that changed everything. After hanging up with her, I sat in that parking lot feeling like someone had rearranged my entire reality. My hands were shaking as I pulled out my phone and opened Instagram, something I barely ever did. I found Diana's profile and immediately saw it. Dozens of photos from what was obviously a wedding. Diana in a stunning white dress, Warren looking sharp in his tux, both of them glowing with happiness. But it wasn't just them. As I scrolled, my heart sank deeper with each image. There was Mom, tears streaming down her face in that way mothers cry at their daughters' weddings. Dad, looking prouder than I'd ever seen him, walking Diana down the aisle. The entire wedding party posed together like a magazine spread. A massive cake that probably cost more than my monthly rent. People dancing, laughing, celebrating. And then I saw the guest list, and that's when I really started to feel sick. Our neighbors from childhood. Dad's golf buddies from the country club. His co-workers from the accounting firm. Mom's book club friends. Relatives I hadn't seen in years, cousins from 3 states away, my great-aunt from California who only shows up for major life events. Even people who barely kept in touch with our family were there, smiling and celebrating my sister's big day. Everyone. Everyone except me. This wasn't some intimate ceremony with limited space. This was a huge celebration with easily over 100 guests. They had invited basically everyone they'd ever met, except their own daughter and sister. The drive to my parents' house is still a blur. I was running on pure adrenaline and fury, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles were white. All I could think about were those photos and how I'd been erased from my own family's most important moment. I didn't even knock. Just walked right through the front door like I always did. Willow? Mom called from the kitchen. What are you doing here? It's not Sunday. She came around the corner wiping her hands on a dish towel, and the second she saw my face, I watched her expression change. She knew. She absolutely knew why I was there. Why wasn't I invited to Diana's wedding? I said, cutting straight to the point. Mom went pale. She looked around like she was hoping Dad would magically appear to help her navigate this conversation. Willow, let me explain. Dad! I called out, raising my voice. Get in here. Now. Dad appeared from the living room looking annoyed, like I was interrupting something important. What's all the yelling about? Tell me why I wasn't invited to Diana's wedding. They looked at each other, having one of those silent conversations that married couples do when they're trying to figure out which one of them has to handle the mess. Look, Willow, Mom said weakly, you know you don't really like big parties and crowds and all that stuff. We just figured you wouldn't want to come anyway. I stared at her, honestly speechless for a moment. Are you serious right now? You decided for me that I wouldn't want to come to my own sister's wedding? Well, you never seemed interested when we talked about it, Dad said. You never talked about it. For months, nobody said anything to me about wedding plans. I kept waiting for someone to bring it up, but you all just acted like it wasn't happening. Mom sat down heavily at the kitchen table, suddenly looking older than her years. Willow, you have to understand. No, I don't have to understand anything. Just tell me the real reason. Dad crossed his arms, and I could see him making the decision to stop sugarcoating. Fine. You want the truth? Diana's got her life together. She's successful, she's marrying a lawyer, she's got her career on track. If you'd been at that wedding, what would you have had to talk about? You would have just stood there feeling sorry for yourself. My jaw actually dropped. Excuse me? We didn't want to watch you stand there all alone, feeling bad about yourself because you're not married and don't even have a boyfriend, Mom added quietly, like she was doing me some kind of favor. But you invited Amanda, I said, thinking of our cousin who's 5 years older than me and also single. Mom looked down at her hands. She had nothing to say to that. The real problem, I said, feeling this strange calm wash over me, is that you guys are so used to me never asking for anything that you just forgot I existed. You forgot about my feelings completely. That's not fair, Dad protested. Isn't it? When was the last time any of you asked me how I was doing? When was the last time you included me in anything important? I'm your daughter, and you treated me like I was some distant relative you barely tolerate. The kitchen went quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. Mom was still staring at her hands, and Dad was looking anywhere but at me. Well, I said, feeling strangely calm all of a sudden, I guess now you know not to expect me to invite you to my wedding. Mom looked up and actually smiled. Willow, honey. Dad straight up laughed. I don't think I'll be waiting around for that invitation anytime soon. Let's be realistic here. You're probably never going to get married. I didn't argue with them. What was the point? They clearly had no idea what was actually going on in my life, and at that moment, I realized I didn't feel like enlightening them anymore. Okay, I said simply. We'll see about that. I turned around and walked out of their house, and during the entire drive back to my apartment, I kept thinking about how wrong they were about everything. They had no clue about my life, and they'd just proven they didn't care enough to find out. Here's what they didn't know. A year earlier, I'd been promoted to deputy director at my company, a huge deal that I'd been excited to share with them. But every time I brought it up, Diana would interrupt with some story about her own job or whatever drama was happening in her life. Eventually, I just stopped trying. 8 months ago, I'd bought my own apartment in one of the nicest neighborhoods in the city. I was incredibly proud of it, my first real home, something that was completely mine. But again, when I tried to tell my family about it, the conversation always got hijacked by Diana's latest news. And then there was the biggest thing they didn't know about. I'd been dating someone for several years. Julian. We'd met back in college, he was in a parallel program to mine, and we'd been friends for a long time. I had no idea his family had money. After college, we lost touch for a while, the way you do when life pulls you in different directions. 7 years ago, when I started working at my current company, I was shocked to see Julian there. He was already in a high-level position, and I later found out that his dad actually owned the company. We reconnected, became friends again, and eventually started dating. About 6 months before Diana's wedding, 6 months before I found out I'd been excluded from my own family, Julian had proposed to me. We'd been engaged for 6 months, and not one person in my family had noticed the ring on my finger. Not once had anyone asked me why I was suddenly wearing jewelry on my left hand. They were all so wrapped up in Diana's world that they didn't pay attention to anything else. Julian and I had decided to keep our relationship quiet. His family was well known in our city, they were always in the local news for business deals or charity work, but they were also very private people. They didn't have social media accounts, didn't like people gossiping about their personal lives. I wasn't from a wealthy family obviously, but I liked their approach. I didn't want people talking about my relationship either, so I kept it to myself. I'd actually tried to tell my family about Julian several times over the years. But every single time I brought him up, Diana would jump in with some story about herself, and my parents would focus on her instead. After a while, I gave up trying. And my parents never once asked me what I'd been trying to tell them. After that confrontation with my parents, I went home and had a long conversation with Julian about everything that had happened. "So what do you want to do?" he asked after I told him the whole story, his eyes gentle but concerned as he held my hands in his. "I want to cross them off our guest list," I said without hesitation. Julian nodded. "I think that's fair. After what they did to you, they don't deserve to be there." We'd already been planning a small wedding anyway, something intimate with just our closest people, maybe 30 guests total. Julian's parents were graciously paying for everything, and his mom and sister were handling most of the planning, which took a lot of stress off me. The next day, I called my grandmother, my aunt, and my 2 cousins on my mom's side. These were the only family members I actually wanted at my wedding, and I sent them formal invitations 2 months before the ceremony. "Willow, this is so exciting," my aunt said when she got the invitation, her voice bubbling with genuine happiness. "I had no idea you were even dating anyone serious." "We've been together for a while," I said. "We just like to keep things private." "Well, I'm so happy for you, honey. The venue looks beautiful from the pictures." We'd chosen this gorgeous old mansion for the ceremony. Julian's family had connections with the owners, and it was absolutely perfect. His mom and sister went all out with the decorations, lights and garlands strung through all the trees in the garden, an amazing wedding arch made of lanterns, waiters dressed in vintage outfits that matched the mansion's historical period. It was going to be like something out of a fairy tale. Everything was going smoothly until about a month before the wedding, when my phone rang and I saw my mother's name on the screen. I almost didn't answer, but I figured I might as well get it over with. "Willow," she screamed into the phone before I could even say hello. "Your father and I are in complete shock. How could you not invite your own parents to your wedding? We found out by accident when we saw the invitation at your grandmother's house." I stayed calm, the sound of her voice no longer having the power to upset me the way it once did. "I told you not to expect an invitation to my wedding. You were there when I said it. You can't be serious about this, Willow. We're your parents, and Diana is your sister. But that didn't stop you from excluding me from her wedding. Willow, please. We can work this out. We made a mistake with Diana's wedding, but..." I hung up on her. About an hour later, Diana called. "Willow, what the hell?" she said as soon as I picked up. "Why didn't you invite me to your wedding? A normal sister wouldn't do this." I didn't even bother explaining anything to her. I just hung up immediately. A few days later, I found out from my cousin what my family's real reaction was. Apparently, my cousin had mentioned that my wedding was only going to have 30 people, and Diana had gone off about it. "They're having some cheap, pathetic wedding in someone's backyard," Diana had said. "It's so embarrassing. My wedding had 150 people, and Willow's only having 30. They probably couldn't afford anything better." After my cousin told me what Diana had said, I felt even better about my decision to exclude them. They clearly didn't understand what kind of wedding we were actually having, and honestly, I didn't care if they ever found out. The wedding day arrived, and it was absolutely perfect. The weather was beautiful, the mansion looked incredible with all the decorations, and everyone who was there actually wanted to be there. My grandmother cried happy tears during the ceremony, my aunt gave the sweetest toast at dinner, and my cousins helped me with my dress and took tons of pictures. I didn't post any photos on social media because that's not my style, but my cousin posted a few on her Instagram. She's always been into that stuff, and I didn't mind her sharing some of the celebration. That's when everything exploded. A few days after the wedding, my phone started going crazy with calls and texts from my parents and Diana. I ignored most of them, but I could see the messages on my lock screen. "Why didn't you tell us about your rich fiancé?" from Diana. "You've embarrassed us in front of the entire city," from Mom. "Call us back immediately," from Dad. I finally looked at my cousin's Instagram to see what they were seeing. She'd posted several photos from the wedding, including some of Julian with his parents. Anyone in our city would recognize Julian's dad immediately. He's always in the local news, friends with the mayor, on the university board of trustees, runs multiple successful companies and a charity foundation. He's basically one of the most prominent businessmen in the area. My family had finally figured out who I'd married, and they were losing their minds about it. My mom was the worst. She started posting on Facebook about how I'd betrayed my family by not inviting them to my wedding. She wrote these long posts about how a loving daughter would never do this to her parents. She even posted that my dad was heartbroken because he'd always dreamed of walking me down the aisle. Every single day, she posted something new about me. She called me ungrateful, cruel, selfish, basically every name in the book. It was embarrassing, but I just ignored it and hoped it would blow over. But then Julian's dad had enough. "Willow," Julian said one evening, his voice unusually serious as he sat beside me, "my dad wants to call your parents because they're posting about you and our family on social media, and he's not going to tolerate it anymore." I was nervous about this, but Julian's dad is not someone you argue with. He called my parents that same night. I don't know exactly what he said to them, but Julian told me the basics. He told my parents that they were embarrassing me and his family with their social media posts. He said if they continued, he would tell everyone in town exactly what had really happened, how they'd excluded me from Diana's wedding and lied about it. He also mentioned that he had contacts at newspapers and TV stations and that he'd make sure everyone at my dad's golf club and my parents' church knew the real story. After that phone call, the social media posts stopped immediately. My parents and Diana stopped calling and texting me too. It was finally quiet. Life was peaceful for about 6 months after the wedding. Julian and I settled into married life, and I was still working at his company. I'd gotten used to the peace and quiet of not dealing with my family's drama. Then one day, HR called me into their office. "Willow, we received a resume yesterday, and the applicant listed you as a reference," the HR director said, sliding a folder across the desk to me. I opened it and saw Diana's name at the top. My stomach dropped. She wrote that you could provide a strong recommendation for her work ethic and character, the HR director continued. I looked at Diana's resume for a few seconds, then closed the folder. Please review her application through the normal process. I won't be providing a special recommendation. A week later, HR called me back to let me know that Diana hadn't been selected for an interview. Her qualifications just weren't strong enough compared to other candidates. I wasn't surprised. Diana had always been more focused on having fun than building real skills. 2 days after that, my phone rang. It was my mother. "Willow, how could you do this to your sister?" she said without even saying hello. "Diana applied for a job at your company, and you sabotaged her chances." I didn't sabotage anything. I told HR to review her application normally, and she didn't make the cut. You should have helped her. She's your sister. She's the sister who didn't invite me to her wedding, remember? And you're the mother who told me I'd probably never get married. Mom was quiet for a few seconds. "Willow, that's all in the past. Diana needs this job. Then she should have applied somewhere else." I hung up. 3 days later, Diana showed up at my apartment. I opened the door, and she pushed right past me into my living room. "We need to talk," she said. "You can't be serious about this, Willow. You have to help me get that job. I don't have to do anything for you." "Yes, you do. You're my sister. Family is supposed to help family." I almost laughed at that. Family is supposed to help family? Where was that philosophy when you were planning your wedding? That was different. No, it wasn't different. You and Mom and Dad made it very clear that I'm not really part of this family. So don't come here now asking for favors. Diana's face got red. You know what? You've always been jealous of me, and this is just your way of getting revenge. I'm not jealous of you, Diana. I just don't want to have anything to do with you anymore. Diana stormed out, slamming my door so hard that my neighbor came out to see what happened. After that, another 6 months went by peacefully. Julian and I were settling into our routine, and I was actually starting to feel happy again. Then I found out I was pregnant. We were both excited about the baby, and Julian's parents were thrilled about becoming grandparents. The only person I told from my side of the family was my grandmother, because she's always been good to me. I should have known Grandma would tell my parents. A few weeks later, a package arrived at my apartment. Inside were tiny hand-knitted baby booties and a photo of my mother sitting in her chair, knitting. There was no note, but the message was clear. This was supposed to be some kind of peace offering. I stared at that photo for a long time. Part of me wanted to believe that maybe my parents had finally realized how badly they'd messed up. Maybe they genuinely wanted to make things right. But then I remembered how they'd laughed when I said they wouldn't be invited to my wedding. I remembered my dad saying I'd probably never get married. I remembered months of being completely ignored while they planned Diana's wedding behind my back. What do you think I should do? I asked Julian that night, showing him the booties and the photo. That's up to you, he said, his eyes gentle. Do you want them in our child's life? I don't know. Part of me misses having a family, but then I think about how they treated me, and I get angry all over again. Whatever you decide, I'll support you. I put the booties away in a drawer and tried not to think about it. Then last week, I was scrolling through Facebook and saw a post from my mother. She'd written about how happy and excited she was that both of her daughters were expecting babies. Apparently, Diana was pregnant too. For the first time in over a year, my mother had written something positive about me. She didn't mention our fight or the wedding drama. She just talked about being excited to be a grandmother to 2 babies. I read that post about 10 times, trying to figure out what it meant. Was this her way of apologizing? Was she finally ready to treat me like an actual daughter? Or was this just about the baby, and she'd go back to ignoring me once the novelty wore off? The truth is, I don't know what to do. Julian's family has been amazing. They've welcomed me completely and treated me like I've always belonged. But they can't replace the family I grew up with, no matter how wonderful they are. I keep thinking about that photo of my mom knitting baby booties. She looked so peaceful and happy in it, like she was genuinely excited about becoming a grandmother. Maybe people can change. Maybe she really does want to fix things between us. But then I think about Diana's wedding photos and how my parents told everyone I was too sick to attend when really they just didn't want me there. I think about how they laughed at the idea of me getting married. I think about how they never noticed my engagement ring, never asked about my job, never showed any interest in my life until they found out who I'd married. Can you really forgive something like that? Should you? I honestly don't know. My husband says it's my choice and he'll support whatever I decide. My grandmother thinks I should give them another chance. My aunt thinks they don't deserve one. What I do know is that I'm not the same person I was 2 years ago. I'm not going to beg for their attention anymore. I'm not going to try to prove that I'm worthy of being included in my own family. If they want a relationship with me and my child, they're going to have to earn it. So I guess we'll see what happens. Maybe they've learned something from all this. Maybe they finally understand that actions have consequences. Or maybe this is just another manipulation, and they'll go back to treating me like I don't matter once they get what they want. But here's what I've learned through all of this. Sometimes the people who hurt you most are the ones who are supposed to love you most. And sometimes, the greatest act of self-love is walking away from people who can't see your worth, even when they share your DNA. Thanks for listening, and if you liked this story, share it with others who might be struggling with family relationships, and don't forget to comment and subscribe for more stories about finding your worth when others can't see it. Remember, blood makes you related, but love and respect make you family.